Cool. So I wanted to talk to you today about testing boundaries and finding balance, because we know things aren't always going to work out exactly as we planned. So we always have to find the balance. And this is heavily inspired by the talk Boundaries by Gary Bernhardt. So if you haven't seen that, it's really good. I think about it a lot, and I specifically was thinking about it in this instance that I will talk to you about. So I'm not on a lot of social media platforms. So this is me, and I'm on LinkedIn. I work for a company called Spring Health, which is a mental health care platform, and we use Ruby and Rails. So I wanted to tell you a story about not necessarily like a feature, but more about what I learned about testing that feature, and want to keep it a little bit like high level. Just taking like a step back at and looking at the full picture. So this is the domain. So without again, getting into too much detail, the high level picture here is we built this search domain for provider recommendations. So we were introducing this feature that was returning 4 results, as you see here, for recommending you a therapist, a provider. So the way that it went was there's a request. It went through GraphQL, and you see very typically in Rails apps, we put things in service objects that handle business layer, business logic. So this is sort of how it looked. It was the search object service that was talking to a query builder. It would go and figure out what filters it needed, and also figure out how the rank should look in the open search query. And that was its whole job, is figure out this open search query, send it back, and get some results. So that was the idea with this domain. So after we did that, we tested it. It was looking pretty good. We felt good about how or test coverage and how the feature was doing. And then, of course, when things sit for a while, and also things are added on top of them, at this point, Elasticsearch and OpenSearch was being used for other features. So this domain grew, and with that, tests grow. So, months later, our platform team started looking at why are tests so slow, and come to find out mostly it was the open search tests that were slowing down the test suite. So, most times you sort of try to address these things with the things that there's build stubbed and RSpec. There's just the known things that we were familiar with and have been written about. But I sort of felt in this case, I was sort of finding patterns, and I was thinking about this talk that Gary Bernhardt gave, and one of the main things he talks about is the value is the boundary. So it made me think about this, and I wanted to take a step back and see, from first principles, what the underlying issue was here. So when I broke it down, I started to think about dependencies, right? So these collaborator objects that are doing some of the building of the query have no dependencies. So they're pretty quick. They operate on their own. And so that's one boundary. And then this query builder also pretty much no dependencies. It just is responsible for putting together a hash that we can send to OpenSearch. And then when you start to look at the main service object, which is the entry point to putting all these objects together, you see that we are relying on both the database and OpenSearch. So this is where we did a lot of testing for just all the different permutations. And then similarly, when we get to the API layer, we have network requests, we have OpenSearch we're hitting, and we're also hitting the database. So this was where I started to see okay, I think our boundaries are a little bit off with these tests. So if we can look at this first and then sort of try to figure out like what some of the like the known things to address, like this might put us in a better place. So that was the first thing I started to look at. And network tests are also expensive, right? So I think from what the code bases that I have worked on, I mostly write unit tests. Like I think integration tests, I haven't seen a ton, but then the way I think about it too is like we have our usual testing pyramid, which is, end-to-end integration unit. And you probably write more unit tests because these other two are expensive. But then there's, I think, the like sub triangle of like our unit tests. The way I see it, like a lot of the tests that we write end up being like the integration point are network requests. And especially like with the way that we have the patterns of writing our business logic in service objects, I feel like this tends to be how our unit tests look. And so I was thinking about this a little bit. So if the value is the boundary, can we start to narrow in on dependencies? So what I was starting to find was, okay, we've tested so many permutations already in our service object. Do we need to like then have these dependencies additionally on the API layer? Like can we mock some things? I didn't end up completely removing these. Like there were some instances where I still needed to call OpenSearch, but this is what I started to tackle just in like breaking down where I was seeing like the value as the boundary. So part of the issue was the way that we were reindexing. We were just doing it way too much. But in order to identify that, I think we needed to like take a step back and look at where our boundaries were. And it turns out that we had similar patterns in other tests, where we were doing a bunch of tests in our service objects, and we were similarly doing the same tests in our API layer. So that was sort of like the thing that was most illuminating from this. And that's it. That's what I got. Thank you.